Look how just angry, really, Harry looks there at the back. You know, the others are trying to sort of put on very neutral expressions, but he looks angry and bitter. Everyone looks pretty unhappy, essentially, apart from, I dare say, Meghan. Look at the expression on her face. She seems kind of pleased, really, as if maybe she's got what she wanted. You know, there were people at the time who said, you know, perhaps that's what Meghan wanted. She's married into the royal family, she's got her prince, and now she's taking him back to America. Despite the whirlwind of drama surrounding Meghan Markle's relationship with the royal family, one steadfast ally emerged, Queen Elizabeth. In a series of unprecedented gestures, Her Majesty went above and beyond to welcome the American actress into the fold, creating a bond that many found surprising. But how did that relationship weather Meghan's criticism and public attacks on the monarchy? Here, I'll analyse key moments between the Queen and Meghan and reveal what they tell us about their relationship. Christmas 2017 was a pivotal moment for Meghan Markle, showcasing the extraordinary lengths the Queen would go in order to make her feel welcome into the royal family. Up until that point, no new members of the royal family had been invited to join until after they were married. But this was Christmas, you know, several months before Harry and Meghan's wedding. So to invite her into the fold was very significant. In Harry and Meghan's Netflix docuseries, Meghan said, "I remember so vividly the first Christmas at Sandringham, calling my mum and she's like, 'How's it going?' And I said, 'Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's just like a big family, like I've always wanted.' And there was just this constant movement and energy and fun." And we heard this from Prince Harry too in a radio interview in Britain, where he talked about how Meghan had really found a second family and really felt extremely welcome. And obviously this is in huge contrast to what we heard from them later in the Oprah Winfrey interview and in the Netflix series. Now this is another important moment and another sign of the Queen welcoming Meghan. It's an engagement at Commonwealth Day Service in March, which the Queen had made a point of inviting Meghan to, even though she wasn't yet married into the royal family. Again, it was unusual. Generally, people would have to wait until they'd married before they were invited, but it was the Queen's sign that you're ready. I think also it was a reference to Meghan's age and her maturity, that she felt, you know, she's an established figure, she's an actress, she's not someone like Princess Diana or Catherine who was younger and less experienced. She really felt that here was someone who was ready to join the firm immediately. Now we turn to the big day itself in May 2018 at St George's Chapel, Windsor. At the time, the country was full of excitement and anticipation, but since then we've learnt about various tensions in the build-up to the big day. One of those apparently was over the menu, that there'd been some dispute over one of the dishes being prepared for the wedding banquet. According to Katie Nicholl of Vanity Fair, Meghan had been tasting the dishes, and one dish that was meant to be vegan, she complained smelt of egg. And apparently at this point, suddenly the Queen walked in and said, "Meghan, in this family, we don't speak to people like that." And that was a sign of the tensions. You know, Meghan was an actress. She's probably used to speaking to staff in quite an abrupt way. But in the royal family, servants, you know, they're almost part of the family. In some cases, you know, like the Queen's right-hand woman, Angela Kelly, they're almost like a sister or a daughter to Her Majesty. Even Meghan's bridal gown was apparently the cause of some dispute. Remember, Meghan was a divorcee, and the Queen was apparently surprised that she was choosing to wear a white dress. According to the royal author Ingrid Seward, in her book Mother and I, Lady Elizabeth Anson, who was a cousin and close confidant of the Queen, claims the Queen said Meghan's wedding dress was too white. In the Queen's opinion, it wasn't appropriate for a divorcee getting remarried in a church to look quite so flamboyantly virginal. Now this is a lovely photograph and really symbolic. What we see here is then Prince Charles walking Meghan down the aisle. You might remember that he met her halfway. She chose to walk the first half on her own, a very sort of symbolic gesture. People interpreted that as a feminist gesture. And then she was met halfway by Charles. And the reason for this was that her own father, Thomas Markle, had been due to walk her down the aisle as tradition dictates. but he'd pulled out. He'd been taken ill with heart problems, and so Charles had kindly agreed to step in. But interestingly, Ingrid Seward, the royal author, claims that the Queen didn't really approve of this, that she felt uncomfortable with it. She doesn't really explain in what way, but I suspect it was just because the Queen felt that it should be Meghan's father who took that role, or no one, I guess. Now look at this. You can see the Queen's face and Prince Philip looking very curious. This picture was taken during the sermon, which was given by Bishop Michael Curry, an American bishop, who Meghan had asked if he would give the sermon. He was quite a well-known figure. And he gave a very vivid sermon on the power of love was his theme. But it did go on a bit. I mean, tradition in Britain is that sermons tend to be no more than about 6 minutes. And at first, the royal family seemed to be enjoying it. They were, perhaps it was more lively oration than they were used to. But then it started to drag on a bit. And then you saw them exchange glances with, I remember seeing Camilla at one point sort of grimacing slightly and exchanging sort of knowing glances. But here the Queen does look a bit fed up. It actually ended up going on for 14 minutes. So you can understand them getting a bit impatient, and certainly Prince Philip, I suspect, seems to be seeing the funny side. Ah yes, now this is the tiara, which looks beautiful there on Meghan's head, but it was, we later learnt, a source of some arguments. I think it was Robert Jobson who first revealed in his book that there'd been some real tensions about which tiara Meghan was going to wear. This was because it was the Queen's aide and right-hand woman Angela Kelly who was in charge of the Queen's jewellery. And the Queen said that Meghan could wear a tiara and gave her a choice, but the arrangements for choosing one had been quite difficult, and there seemed to be some argument over it. It wasn't quite clear. But then in Prince Harry's memoirs Spare, he confirmed it all. He said there had been a big row, and essentially it was because they felt that Angela Kelly was getting too big for her boots. She was not turning up. She was not agreeing to dates when they thought Meghan could see them. And it was a sign that, full of sort of bitterness really, that Harry felt that Meghan wasn't being treated as she should. That, everyone should show her great respect. And here was, a servant, as he saw it, who was just being quite difficult and obstructive. And it was one of those things that really sort of set a bad tone for the marriage and their relationship with the royal family. The thing about tiaras is they are quite complicated to wear, and you need to have a fitting first. In this case, Meghan wanted to try it on when her hairdresser was visiting. I think time was pushing on, and probably messages that got sent from her and Harry to the palace, annoyed Angela Kelly with their tone. So they certainly had difficulty arranging a date, and that seemed to be at the heart of the problem. Now here we are on the balcony at Buckingham Palace for Trooping the Colour, very soon after Harry and Meghan's wedding. And we can see how, yes, Meghan is behind William and Catherine, with Harry there at the back, but she's there centre stage, and this was her first taste of being a married woman in the royal family. Now here we have a very important day in the relationship between the Queen and Meghan. The Queen made a point of inviting Meghan to accompany her on a day of engagements in Cheshire. I think she thought it would be a great way to bond with a new member of the royal family and to show how important she was. The chemistry seemed to be great. You could tell that the Queen was making an effort. There she is laughing. They were watching various things happening that day, sharing jokes to one another. You can see Meghan probably making a joke there, and they were both putting an effort into it. I mean, what's striking to me as well is the outfits. You see the Queen there in her distinctive bright colour. I mean, look at it, it's almost neon. And then we see Meghan, who, as we later learned, she said that she'd been advised to wear sort of subdued colours, not to try and compete with the Queen. So we see that here. But overall, it was really a sign of the effort that the Queen was putting in. I mean, this was acknowledged even when Meghan had soon become disillusioned. She acknowledged the efforts that the Queen had made. For example, in her interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2021, she recalled, "The Queen, for example, has always been wonderful to me. I mean, we had one of our first joint engagements together. She asked me to join her, and I went on the train, and we had breakfast together that morning, and she gave me a beautiful gift, and I just really loved being in her company. And that gift that she mentioned there was these earrings, which you could see she was really enjoying wearing that day. And here we see Meghan getting out of the car as they arrived on their day of engagements, and you can see the blanket behind them. You know, as we know from the Queen with others, one of the signs that she had for really welcoming someone into her embrace was sharing a blanket. Now this is an image from the Queen's Young Leaders Awards ceremony, and it was with young people from all around the Commonwealth. And I've chosen it because it's a symbol of the efforts really that the Queen went to try to choose areas that she thought Meghan would enjoy working with. And she thought, as an American coming from outside, she would enjoy the chance to embrace the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is something that was probably closest to the heart of the Queen. She felt very strongly about it, and she appointed Meghan and Prince Harry as ambassadors to it. And the whole thing ended up being quite sad really, because at the time, Meghan and Harry thought it was wonderful. They were very keen to be involved. They had more than one role. But then later, like when they made their Netflix series, they had a long item about how sort of dreadful the Commonwealth was. They were associating it with imperialism and this type of thing. And it was a very negative view of the Commonwealth that, you know, would have really upset the Queen. And here we have a picture from Royal Ascot, which was an event of great importance to the Queen. She loved nothing more than Royal Ascot Week. We can see Harry and Meghan dressed appropriately there, and the keenness really on the Queen's face as she talks to Meghan, making sure she's okay, that she's enjoying things, presuming that the carriage drive was okay. And there was, I remember other members of the royal family didn't seem to be making such an effort perhaps with Meghan, but the Queen really was. So I think this is a sign of, even on a day where she's there just to relax and enjoy herself, she was making the effort to see that Meghan was happy. Now this is a really interesting picture. This is on Buckingham Palace balcony again. It was a centenary event of the RAF. But we can start to see tensions really. You know, you've seen how relaxed Meghan has looked in some of the previous photographs. Well, here she looks much more tense. I think the Queen was already aware of tensions behind the scenes between Meghan and Harry and William and Catherine. Apparently there'd been some petty arguments. There was one about presents at Easter or something like that. But I think it was news of these things was getting back to the Queen. But you can see typically she was ignoring this sort of thing. She was there putting on her usual straightforward, smiling, happy demeanour. But Meghan starts to look uncomfortable. And I think that was a sign of things to come. We now know that about this time, the Queen had stepped in to try to help Meghan resolve her dispute with her father. You know, things had got very bad at the time of the wedding, and they had started to become estranged. And Meghan had asked the Queen's advice, and the Queen had said to her that she really should travel to Mexico and visit her father and try and speak to him. And if she can't speak to him or on the phone, then to write a letter. So eventually Meghan did this. She wrote a long letter to him, but according to her father himself, it just made things much worse. He actually found the letter quite insulting. But what it does show is the Queen realising the importance of Meghan's relations with her family, you know, and how it could be a running sore, that she saw the problems that it could bring, and that indeed it did bring. So she was very wise in that respect. Now the Queen is not in this photograph, but it's an important one because it shows Meghan at Sandringham for Christmas again that year. And it was in fact the last time that she spent Christmas with the royal family. We all know how important that Sandringham gathering is to the royals and always was to the Queen. It's that big gathering of all the royal family together. Here they are meeting the crowds who come out after church. And it was a sign of unity, a show of unity, but behind the scenes there'd been all sorts of disputes. And the Queen knew about these, but felt that it was important to try to get them together at least, and it showed the efforts that she was making. Now, this is a picture from the following year, 2019, which was probably the most important year of Harry and Meghan's time together in the royal family. We see them at an engagement. It was quite an important one. It was the 50th anniversary of the investiture of Charles as the Prince of Wales, and the Queen had gathered everyone together for this. You can see Meghan heavily pregnant with baby Archie. And it shows how she was still carrying out engagements, still invited to things, but it really was the beginning of the end. Now, this picture was taken a short while later, and it's at the Commonwealth Day Service, which was always an important day for the Queen because of her love of the Commonwealth. We see Meghan at the heart of the royal family there. Yes, behind William and Catherine, but she's there with Harry, right with the senior members of the royal family. Remember that Prince Charles, as he then was, his vision of the future of the royal family was himself and Camilla, both his sons, with both their wives. That's what he thought the future was. And the Queen Elizabeth, was happy to go along with that. So they all felt that Meghan was there. She was going to play a very important role in the future of the royal family. Now, this is a beautiful photograph. It's the official picture that was released after the birth of baby Archie. And you can see the Queen and Prince Philip coming to see him for the first time. They're pictured there with Meghan's mother, Doria, and the Queen was said to like Doria a great deal. She spent a bit of time with her at the wedding and after, and there she looks absolutely thrilled to be meeting her latest great-grandchild. People can forget, the affection that the Queen had for Prince Harry. He talked about himself as, sort of favourite grandson, but there's no doubt that she cared about him deeply and would have wanted him to be happy. So she was pleased that he was getting married, would have been delighted that he's had his first child. And people have said that the Queen was sad that Meghan's family was fractured, that her father wasn't able to share in those moments. And we know that he still hasn't met his grandchildren. And of course, he still hasn't met his son-in-law, Harry. They spoke to each other on the phone several times, but he's never actually met him. And that's said to be something that the Queen was sad about. Now, in this photograph, you'll notice that there is no Meghan, but that's why it's significant that it was the Christmas broadcast by the Queen in 2019, and you can see photographs there of William and Catherine, their family, and of Charles and Camilla, and of Philip, but not one of Harry and Meghan. Now, you might say, this is not significant at all, there's only space on her desk for certain photographs. But Harry later made clear that he felt it was a real snub, and it was something that for him came to symbolise that he wasn't seen as important in the royal family. To me, it does seem very petty and is a reflection of what we saw throughout his memoirs, that it was just sort of petty annoyance at very silly things. In his book Revenge, the author Tom Bower wrote, "To Harry's fury, there was no photograph of himself, Meghan and Archie. The Windsors were airbrushing the Sussexes from history." Wow, now a few weeks later we have this. This is when we had confirmation that Harry and Meghan would be quitting as working royals. Royal bombshell, the front page of the Daily Mail said, and my goodness, it really was. Despite the Queen's efforts to find a way to keep them within the royal family and, make best use of their talents, they had made clear that they wanted to leave. They didn't want to be full-time royals anymore. They suggested some way that they could be sort of part-time royals and earn money. But, we had the Sandringham summit and the events that followed, and the Queen was making clear that no, they couldn't combine money-making with carrying out royal engagements. Now, this is a very significant photograph because it's really the last one that we see of Meghan in the same picture as the Queen. By that point, Harry and Meghan were living in Canada, but they came back for certain engagements and for the Commonwealth Day Service that we see here with the rest of the royal family. But look how just angry, really, Harry looks there at the back. The others are trying to sort of put on very neutral expressions, but he looks angry and bitter. Everyone looks pretty unhappy, essentially, apart from, I dare say, Meghan. Look at the expression on her face. She seems kind of pleased, really, as if maybe she's got what she wanted. There were people at the time who said, perhaps that's what Meghan wanted. She's married into the royal family, she's got her prince, and now she's taking him back to America, which is what we see here. So maybe that accounts for her expression. Indeed, Meghan said on Netflix in her series, "We had left Westminster Abbey, and then that was it. Of course it was emotional." She also said, "I never wanted to upstage or ruffle any feathers, so I just tried to blend in. But I wore a lot of colour that week. I thought, well, let's just look like a rainbow." And once the couple had moved to California, we had the infamous interview with Oprah Winfrey and all its bombshells. Here we see the Daily Mail's 3:30 a.m. front page with the details of that interview. And, my goodness, it really was a sensation. All the accusations against members of the royal family that Catherine had made her cry, these allegations of racism by unnamed members of the royal family. But when it comes to Queen Elizabeth, it's significant that Meghan didn't criticise her, quite the opposite. She went out of her way to be positive, talking about how she'd been welcomed by the Queen, and talk at length about how much respect and affection she had for her. But there's no doubt that regardless of that, the Queen would have been deeply upset and shocked by this interview because it was so damaging to the institution of the monarchy. According to the royal author Robert Jobson, the Queen was mystified by their behaviour, calling it quite mad. She thought her grandson's judgment was being distorted by the influence of his wife because he was so consumed by his love for her. My colleague Rebecca English reported at the time that Harry and Meghan's actions over the subsequent years left the Queen feeling very low indeed. Nevertheless, the Queen invited Harry and Meghan to her Platinum Jubilee celebrations in 2022. And here we see Harry and Meghan at the service at St Paul's of Thanksgiving for the Jubilee. It was the Queen's record-breaking 70th anniversary of her reign, so it's a very important event. But it's significant that we didn't see any photograph with the Queen. I think she made a point of not wanting to be photographed with them anymore. Here they are outside St Paul's. I remember seeing some footage of them waiting for cars with other members of the royal family, and it looked like no one really wanted to talk to them, frankly. They weren't invited to join the rest of the royals on the balcony at Buckingham Palace, and they weren't invited to other events while they were there, so it was quite a brief stay. But nevertheless, it was also the time of Lilibet, their second child's first birthday, and it was said that Meghan very much hoped to get a photograph of Lilibet with Queen Elizabeth because Lilibet had been named after the Queen. Lilibet is the pet family name for the Queen that was used by her father and other very close members of the family. According to Harry, it was a tribute to his grandmother, the name, but for other people it was insulting. And in fact, the BBC reported that the Queen wasn't pleased about it, that she felt she hadn't been asked about it first, and that this was a cause of great dispute. Nevertheless, the fact is that the Queen wasn't pictured with Lilibet. She met her apparently, she visited Frogmore Cottage and said hello to her new great-grandchild, but didn't agree to any photograph being taken. Now that was the last meeting ever between the Queen and Meghan because the Queen died in September that year. Here we see Meghan at the funeral. What you might observe is those earrings, which we saw earlier that she was wearing on that happy, joyful day in Chester, where she'd been given those earrings as a gift. And here she's wearing them again in tribute to the Queen. Looking back through these photographs, the unprecedented steps the Queen took to make Meghan feel accepted into the royal family are clear. It is hard to imagine how the Queen felt about Meghan's later attacks on the monarchy. The Queen was her greatest ally, offering forgiveness and an olive branch where others didn't. Yet, without the Queen's guiding hand, it now falls to Meghan and the other royals to navigate their differences and find a way forward. I hope you enjoyed that. For more great royal videos, make sure you subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel.